I think we're live. Hi everyone, welcome to week 13 of the Sober Sessions. I hope you're doing great, having a wonderful weekend. Today we are taking questions from you, so you can ask us anything you want. Any personal questions for Dave, fire away,
Anything.
Make him cringe, absolutely go for it. And we've already got some questions that have been submitted ahead of time, so we'll start off with those. But if you want to put your questions in the comments, if you want to direct them to someone in particular, absolutely do that. Or if you just want us to answer them as a panel, then you don't need to put someone's name on it, just leave it as is. So I'll start us off with a question from Nicola, which is, did your addiction move from alcohol to something else? I never had a sweet tooth, and now all I want is cake and biscuits. I keep buying them when I shouldn't. I'm guessing it's all about getting the dopamine fix. I love you guys. So who wants to take that one?
I'm fatter. Stop drinking. I'm about
Go for it then.
going heavier.
Yeah, but is that lockdown or is that just through not drinking?
I think it's being a fat pig. Yeah, I think some of it will be to do with lockdown because I'm not exercising quite the same as I was before lockdown. But to keep my weight down, I've always heavily relied on exercise anyway. My diet's fairly balanced, but what I did notice is when I quit the red wine on the evenings, I replaced it with chocolate buttons, genuinely the big bags, and that went on for, it was every weekend, every night of the weekend for about 10 months. And yeah, I enjoyed, I think part of it was like the dopamine, like you say, the kind of pleasure you get out of having something. But I think the other bit was just the genuine missing sugar, because you don't kind of realise how much sugar is in the wine, and then all of a sudden you take it away and you crave sugar. So for me, I think it was just a genuine wanting something sweet. It took a while, and now I've kind of cut it out, and I try and snack on healthier things, fruit and nuts, but that's still very heavy in sugar. Personally, my advice is get the sobriety under your belt and then worry about your weight, because I didn't quit drinking to lose weight or to remain slim. I quit drinking for a whole host of more important reasons, so I can accept putting on a little bit of weight, and I know I can get that under control because it's not something that I've struggled with in the past. So
I did that post the other day, didn't I, about eating that lovely bit of cake. And a lot of people were talking to me about that. And I said, look, it's hard enough to give up the booze in the beginning. So give yourself a break, really.
Yeah.
You know? Just take it as is. And after all, you used to eat dirty old kebabs at 2 a.m. when you're drinking as well. So how about you, Lisa?
It's natural, I think, to kind of replace your drinking time with something else, whether that be food. But I had a conversation with Alex actually the other day, and she was like, you've become addicted to work. And I was like, really? And actually thinking about it, I think I am, you know. I think I've replaced I think I've replaced, like, I do not know what to do with myself other than work. So every single night I work until I go to bed, whether that's doing social media posts for one business or another business, or checking my emails that could wait. They could actually wait, but yeah, so I've kind of replaced it with work, Alex says.
Haven't you been busy checking other emails as well recently, Lisa?
No, I've give that a bit of a miss, this dating thing now. Yeah, I went on a date at weekend and it wasn't for me.
She's decided, no, she didn't, just one day and that's that.
This is off topic, right? But I did go on a date and I went, and he failed to tell me that 1, he didn't drive, 2, he still lived with his mum, and he only tried a parsnip for the first time 4 years ago. Like,
oh my God.
What kind of person does that?
Is that why the date was going for a nice walk then? Because he didn't drive.
Yeah, and then I give him a lift on. And then he got in the car and went, oh, I've never been in this kind of car before. I was like, oh, just go on, Lisa. Anyway, go on, move on.
Sam, with that, am I right in saying it is the sugar thing as well? As much as it's the dopamine, it's as much the sugar replacement.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I've got a slightly different take on it, because I completely agree that when you quit drinking, that's got to be you've got to be concentrating on that. And I wouldn't worry about doing too much in those early days. But I think with alcohol, there is a tendency, because it's a sedative and it tends to take the edge off our feelings, that when you're drinking, you tend to, if something bad happens, you tend to have a drink to deal with it. And I think the problem is, and for me, stopping drinking is not just about not drinking, it's about developing new ways of dealing with life and bad things when they happen without necessarily reaching for a drink. And I think there is a bit of a tendency, if you don't have a plan in place, so you're not drinking, so you just reach out for the next thing to put in your mouth to change your mood. And I think you need, so be easy on yourself for the first part, but try not to use eating as your way of coping with things, which there is a tendency to do. So like, for example, I tend to sort of exercise. I do a lot of reading. I read books and comics and all sorts. I like watching TV. I quite enjoy cooking. So that's how generally I deal with things, which is on the whole fairly positive. Then you've got things like yoga and meditation and meeting friends, and there's a whole world of things you can do. But equally, you can end up drinking loads of caffeine or smoking loads of cigarettes, or drinking, like someone in my group the other day said they were smoking loads of weed all the time. And query, yeah, it's probably better than drinking, but it's not necessarily giving you the chance of living your best life ever. So I'd say, yes, that's completely correct, but just be a bit careful that don't have that as your long-term coping mechanism, because it's likely to lead to, you know, misery and frustration, much as drinking alcohol did.
Yeah.
Interesting. The next question is actually from Richard, who said, I kicked the habit of smoking via a £5 bet. No idea how long ago. Then I started drinking to excess. Does it mean I have an addictive personality? So it's along the same lines. And I think what William said there around how don't sort of, you know, what are you using as your coping mechanism? I think that it's, once we get strength in our sobriety, why do we need to cope? What are we coping with? What's at the root of all this? Where's it all come from, that need to cope? I mean, I was looking back recently and I ran 16 marathons in 5 years, which was addictive behavior, exercising, gym all the time. Like Lisa said, I work until, you know, I get up at 6 a.m. I'm working straight away. I work to 8 o'clock. So that's become my new addiction. So why is there this need to disconnect, to run away, suppress something? You know, why do we need to turn to those? So, and I don't know whether addictive personalities are actually a thing. I don't think they're medically proven. Anyway, over to you guys on that one.
I think, I think you're right about that. The evidence says that you can be predisposed to addiction, but not that your genes cause addiction. So I think to a certain extent, we wouldn't be in this position having stopped drinking unless we had addictive personalities. But I see that £5 bet. I mean, I'd need more information, but I see that £5 bet very much like a dry January or a Stoptober, that when you quit for a reason, for a set amount of time, you're not actually working on your mindset to not be a drinker anymore. You're just trying to get the bet done. Almost like white knuckling it, or
willpower.
Yeah, willpower. So, you know, proving you can quit drinking for a bet or for a dry January or a Stoptober or for whatever is not the same as working on your mindset to become a non-drinker as a lifestyle choice. That's my take on it.
I'd add to that as well, because I think this whole thing like an addictive personality, and I used to hear this all the time in AA meetings, people would say, I'm never happy, I always want to move on to the next thing, and there always has to be something new. But for me, that's just life and ambition.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to be looking at the next thing and moving on to it. And people who don't do that tend to sort of sit there and don't do an awful lot with their lives. So I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing. And I think human beings generally are looking for the next thing. They're looking to improve things. And I don't see that as a bad thing. And I certainly don't see it necessarily as addictive personality. I think everyone has got the potential to become addicted to a drug, particularly alcohol. But a lot of people, and when I'm talking about coping mechanisms, so my life's fairly good at the moment, but everyone has bad days. Everybody, no matter how good their life is, will have bad days. And what I'm talking about is that, what do you do when the shit hits the fan, basically? Because a lot of the time when things get really bad, you're desperate for something to take the edge off it. And that's the coping mechanism. And I just feel like don't think that just because you're always looking for the next improvement, that that's necessarily a bad thing. Because as I say, I see that as just, that's human nature. That's just how we are, and it's not bad at all.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, Lisa, it's for you and Simon, where you say about your work and Simon with the marathons and whatever. Do you feel like when it comes to the drinking, it was like an all or nothing thing, you know? Is that another angle bit?
Go on, you go, Simon.
That's exactly. I mean, in my book, there's a chapter called All or Nothing Personalities, and that describes me perfectly with everything that I do. And if I'm 1 foot in and 1 foot out, I just don't bother doing it. It has to be all or nothing. With
you
anything.
two are twins. I tell you,
I think we were separated.
twins.
Yeah, I've always been the same. It's like when I went to Slimming World, like years ago, I wanted to lose a couple of stone, went to Slimming World, but didn't just go to Slimming World, right? I then became a consultant. I then became a team developer. And then, like, it's just everything. It's like when I got sober, I didn't just get sober. You know, we've got the sober experiment, the podcast, the website, the workplace, like everything possible to do with sobriety. I'm like, let's have it.
Well, you haven't got sober pants yet, so you've missed that one out.
Ah, well, you never know.
Coming up.
Well, what's the next one, Simon?
The next one is from Melody. Are your partners resentful of you giving up drinking? Do they feel judged or now excluded from your new life? Love the site and love you peeps.
Oh, what a lovely name, Melody, as well.
Who wants to start that one?
I'll start that one.
Yeah,
mine can be dead quick. My partner was resentful. He then carried on drinking more, and now we're not together. Next.
My husband supported me completely the opposite of Lisa, and went sober with me. He agreed to a year. He is going to drink at his brother's birthday, which is coming up in August. I'm fine with that because he's never really gone from like I was. He really can take a drink, leave a drink, and then leave it for as long as he wants. And afterwards he said, yeah, I won't drink again then until my next big occasion. And I know that will be a big occasion. I suppose I feel a bit sad that he feels he needs to have it at an occasion or wants to have it, but that's just my demons with it. So I wouldn't say he's particularly resentful. I think he's actually quite grateful that he's not having to deal with me being a raging lunatic, rocking in a corner and being a nasty bastard at the end of the night, to be honest with you.
The thing is, Alex, you know, when you've done it together, you're both going through this big change together, aren't you? Whereas when one of you has done it, that can be such a huge change, especially for the other one. Like in my case, it really shone a light on his drinking, and he became resentful of the fact that I'd stopped and how much I noticed that he was drinking a lot more. But
you wouldn't have kept that quiet either, would you?
No, I did for way too long, actually. But I think it must be really, really difficult when one of you does it and is going through these huge changes. Like, I met my husband in a kitchen drunk, I got married drunk, I got sober, I thought, what?
Do you know what's interesting for me is that a bit like you, Alex, like when he has a drink, it doesn't trigger me, but what it triggers me when she has a little, she's not a big drinker, but when she has a bit too much, I get really irritable.
Yeah.
Because she'll make decisions that I know she wouldn't have made before if she was sober. So with the kids and that, she'd say, oh, go on, you can do that. And then she'd make promises for the next day. And then the next day comes, I say, do you remember that? She went, oh, yeah, it's fine. And I say, well, it isn't actually. I'll get really ratty around her, you know. But the other thing I'd say is she misses when we, like, go away for a weekend or something and we used to go and have a drink and have a drink with dinner. She misses that. But she, as you said, Alex, she certainly doesn't miss me.
The aftermath.
Jekyll and Hyde, like, walking into the bedroom. I want you.
Well, at least
you and Alex were like separated at birth.
Yeah, at least you were on your feet, Dave. I was dragged face front to bed, face down to bed. I was like, oh, get in bed, I'm sick of you. But no, I think, I don't know if resentful for me, I can see where resentment would come from, because I think that's the same with any lifestyle choice that you make as a couple, though. You know, if you both are enjoying something together and then the other one decides to change that habit or that pattern, it's going to put some strain on everything, isn't it? Because you change the dynamic of the entire relationship. I mean, my relationship was built, I met him in a bar. My relationship was built around partying and getting pissed. That's what it was built on. I'm just, suppose I'm a bit grateful, really, that it could have been that he was a heavy drinker and we were both ending up down the toilet, but he's not. And I'm lucky. And I do think it is luck of the draw with that. If you decide to give up drinking and your partner doesn't want to, it's going to cause some problems depending on the level they drink at.
Yeah.
I've often thought about how it would have felt if it was the other way around. If my wife had said she'd stopped drinking and then, she had got judgy with me or felt that I should change, and I wouldn't have wanted to. When I was at the peak of my drinking, I would have been, I would have pushed that away. I wouldn't have wanted to know, and I don't know where that would have ended up. Thankfully, she was really supportive, and she now rarely drinks, maybe a couple of glasses one night a week, and she kind of quite proudly tells me, I haven't drunk for a week or 2 weeks, but she can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
But there was no resentment, or she didn't tell me there was anyway. Maybe we should ask her best friend.
What do you think, Sam?
I was sort of at the other end of the scale, to be honest, because I was given an ultimatum of stop drinking or I'll go with the kids. So I was like totally at the other end. And maybe because of that, she's totally cut herself off from this side of my life as well. So she doesn't want, I dedicated the book to her. So anyone who's read it will see that she won't read it. There's nothing to do with it at all. So I suppose it's sort of slightly different dynamic, I suppose, from that perspective.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it is a very subjective thing. It all
definitely.
Your relationship, how you were together, in what conditions you finished drinking, and also what type of drinker they are or were.
Yeah,
exactly. So my wife doesn't. She's like Simon's wife. So she will have. I mean, not even once a week. Maybe like once a month she'll have a glass, and she's kind of stopped doing that now. And I think for her, she's just glad that I've stopped, because, as I say, it pretty much finished our marriage. It was on its last legs when I quit. So he sort of dragged it back.
It is, by the sounds of it.
Well, the next question.
I don't want to see your book.
The next question is, can sobriety change a marriage? I'm really struggling at the moment. My marriage is crumbling badly. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So I think we've probably answered that, haven't we?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, when you're drinking, you're papering over a lot of problems. Yeah. So if you meet someone when you're drinking and you're drinking the whole time, when you quit, you're either going to find that there's some compatibility there and you can keep it going, or you're going to find there isn't and it doesn't.
And it's the same with
the thing about a liquid relationship, isn't it? It really sorts out the difference. And luckily for me, we're okay. But she's like your wives, like she can take a leave. She's even got an app that she can mark a little star on her app to say when she hasn't. And at the end of the month, you look, I've been really good this month. And it just helps her, for her. I mean, she could go 2 weeks, 3 weeks without even thinking about a drink. Cow.
Don't you think, though, as well as this, and I mean, yeah, it can go either way, but I also think it's really important, if you're the person who isn't drinking and your partner isn't, for whatever reason, supportive, maybe they are actually supportive, but they've just not stopped drinking with you and you're seeing it as them not being supportive. It's really important to have your boundaries. And I know she's not with us anymore, but, Mandy's very clear on that in all aspects, and Kate, all aspects of the life is having those boundaries around your own sobriety. And if you don't want someone drunk around you, then you've got to stand up for that. And if they're not respecting that, then they're crossing over your boundaries that you've set to protect your sobriety.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think going back to what Dave was saying as well, the fact of the matter is drunk people are intensely irritating. That's just a given. So if you're with someone who's drinking a lot, they're going to really irritate you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. All right, should we go on to the next question? Susie said, I often hear people talk about how much better their mental health is since they stopped drinking. And of course, there's no disputing alcohol can make depression and anxiety so much worse. However, in my experience, I didn't really even realise I had depression and anxiety until I stopped drinking. And then suddenly there was nothing to mask or numb those feelings anymore. I've been sober for nearly 5 years now, but the last couple of years have been the hardest, working to keep my mental health level under control. Just wondered if anyone else relates to this. That's interesting, because I've had a few clients in recent weeks who might be 3-4 months into sobriety. They've had pink clouds, they've been in a really great place, and then suddenly they've just gone flat.
Crash.
And
Yeah.
you know, I mean, Kate talked previously about it being a time for growth and that sort of thing. But obviously, this is different if it's recognizing that actually there's depression, there's anxiety going on.
I struggled, Simon. I didn't know I had anxiety until after I stopped drinking. I know Susie actually on a personal level, so she'll know this already. So I'm just telling her what we've probably chatted about. But yeah, I didn't know. I just thought I was a typically kind of, a list maker, like a worrier. I just thought those were normal attributes of my personality. And actually what I found is I really struggle, since I've stopped drinking, I've really struggled to keep my anxiety in check. And the difference is I recognise it now, and that's probably what Susie's finding is, you know it's there and it feels uncomfortable, and you're having to sit with the fact that it's uncomfortable instead of numbing it out with the alcohol. And I've not been sober as long as Susie, but I've worked a heck of a lot on recognising when I'm anxious, knowing what's triggered the anxiety and thinking, right, come back to now, where's it coming from? What's going on in my head? Why do I feel like that? And as you know, Simon, having to do a lot of work on my early childhood and on my distant past, which to some people could be, that's quite damaging. But for me, it's very important to find out why do I feel like this? Where does that need to have something additional like alcohol in my life come from? And it all boils down to the fact that certain traumas in your life, certainly in my case, have caused me to be a very anxious person, because a lot of my childhood was spent in the unknown and in a state of constant alert, waiting for something bad to happen. So I think, if you can afford to, I certainly would go to see a counsellor or, a psychotherapist if you can. But if not, at the very least, start reading some books around trauma, around anxiety, around depression, because there's loads of stuff out there that can help you to recognise this, and then move on to how you deal with it in healthier ways. And I know
so much of it,
anyway,
I mean,
so.
I know I sound like a stuck record, but so much of it is absolutely from childhood. The book I'm reading at the moment is called Running on Empty, and it's all about childhood emotional neglect, where parents, often it's not what parents do, it's what they don't do. And they don't even intend to not do it, but they don't do it. They don't do the best job they can and it's not normally their fault, but understanding and learning about it can often allow you to sort of fill in those puzzle pieces and really get a handle on it. But you're right, psychotherapy and maybe counselling is well worth looking at. You
said something really interesting, Lisa, about recognising the reasons for childhood trauma, didn't you? About how your parents, not yours, as in the parents of the child.
Yeah, sorry, I was aware with the fairies.
That's why I've brought you back. I could see you like that.
I get distracted very easily. But yeah, sometimes I think what you're saying about childhood trauma, I struggle with this one because I don't want to blame my parents, so then I kind of look at their parents and what they had to deal with, and I suppose it's like a long line of shit parents.
Well, they reckon, I learned about this week. I'm not a psychotherapist, but a psychotherapist told me this. He said that we carry, I've got it written down right in front of me, we carry the trauma for 7 generations before us, apparently.
Wow.
And then he said, and there's actually studies that say it could be as much as 14. I don't quite know how that works, but then, my mum let me down in certain areas, but she had a lot on her plate. I don't blame her, but I would like her to just acknowledge it to kind of help me heal any trauma, hurt, stress that it left me with.
You sound like me. I say that, and Lisa said, you want that validation. She'll have to be quite difficult.
Yeah, I'm just thinking this because I really struggle with going back too far. I'm a very in the now and let's move forward kind of thing. And I know, like, me and Alex have these conversations, and you said, oh yeah, I just want them to say this, or I want to do this, or I find out. And I think it's good to find out where things come from, and it's just how I work. I'm not, but now and moving forward is really, really important. I think we can get stuck too far in the past sometimes and start that woe is me kind of thing, and I think you've got to be really careful of
can I add
that.
something here that me and Alex had a little chat before, and it's interesting that Alex has started to feel like this, and I said actually around my year in sobriety I did, because it's almost like I've got that year under my belt. Now I've got to move on to the next stage. What's the next stage? I know. Let's dig deep into why I started to drink and those deeper levels. And it was after that, for about 3 months, I've become really absorbed into that subject. And I think Laurie said there about Gabor Mate and Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And I used to look at his videos on YouTube, and I got really, really deep about it. And then I got a point, similar to you, Lisa, that I thought, do you know what? This is bringing up all sorts of stuff that I can't really deal with at the moment. And I decided to drop it because it wasn't really serving me now. And a bit like you, Lisa, I sort of think it's probably better for my mental health to just park it up. Park it and maybe come back to it later, or if not, just don't. Because I've got enough to deal with now. And I think I don't need to dig down into that. I just don't think it'd do me any good mentally.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it is very much down to the individual, isn't it? And what you can handle and what you want to know. And if, you know, not everybody has a reason for feeling anxious or depressed either. I'm only talking about my reason for feeling anxious. People never know the reason they feel like that. It's just a chemical imbalance in the brain. Am I right, William?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think if you've got like an underlying mental health issue, or you've got childhood trauma, a lot of people with that gravitate towards problem drinking because alcohol is a sedative and it takes the edge off it. And it's much more easy to get hold of than heroin or something like other types of morphine or other types of sedatives. So it's the thing people gravitate towards. But I think you don't need to have that to develop an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I had a fantastic childhood. I haven't really so far identified any mental health problems or anything. I'm fine, but I still got addicted to drinking, and it was just through repeated heavy drinking. So I think that it's just worth making that point. There is a tendency, if you have trauma or childhood trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever it is, mental health problems, whatever they are, to gravitate towards problem drinking, that you don't need that to become a problem drinker. You just need to drink enough over a long enough period of time and you get addicted to it. Same, you don't need any of those things to get addicted to smoking or heroin or cocaine.
It's interesting because Gabor Mate, that Dave mentioned, he says that there is no addiction without some level of trauma or emotional neglect. And this book I've been reading, this Running on Empty, some of it is so subtle that, like, for example, a permissive parent who lets a child kind of get away with everything. They're like the cool parent, and you don't realize the damage they're causing, the emotional stuff that they're not doing that actually does have an impact further down the line, because the kid feels unmotivated, they don't ever feel pushed to do anything. So when I've dug into that, I've realized that emotional neglect can come in so many shapes and sizes. We often don't even realize it. And this book's got 12 different styles of parenting, and I imagine if most people who've drunk heavily listen to this, they would recognize some of those parenting styles. To you know, it's a spectrum to one degree or another. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the science behind it, but most people I speak to can pick up things from their past, whether it was a mum, a dad, a brother, a sister, where they feel there was some level of stress or hurt. But yeah, you, like William says, he had a great childhood. It'd be interesting if you listened to that to see if you recognised anything.
Yeah, I might
open it up.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to look into. But I mean, obviously I've not read it, so I'm sort of jumping ahead here. But I suppose if you're opening up to say this is trauma or this is a problem, then I agree. Probably when you look at people with addiction, probably the vast majority of people have had that. But then equally, if it's that wide, probably virtually everyone on the planet suffered it to one degree or another.
That's what I
Can
thought.
I just throw in as well, right? Alcohol is addictive, as is heroin, as it's so, even like you say, I suppose, somebody that hasn't had that, if they just went out and fancied trying it one time, so they could get addicted, like you said, without having that trauma.
Yeah, I think the main point with addiction is a lot of it's in the subconscious, and it's a cause and effect thing. So it's when the drug hits your bloodstream. And it's to do with how quickly it hits your bloodstream, which is when, and I always get this mixed up, but with heroin, you can inject it, or there's other ways of taking it that you're not injecting it. And the injecting it is the most addictive, and that's seen as the most destructive way of doing it, because you're injecting it's going straight into your bloodstream. Now, there's 4 ways we can take a drug. We can inject it, so it's straight into the bloodstream, so we feel the effects immediately. You can smoke it, so it goes into your lungs and then into the bloodstream. That takes a second or 2. You can snort it, and the time scale then is about the same as when you're smoking it. Or you can drink it, and drinking takes the longest from taking the drug for it to going into your bloodstream. So it takes years for your subconscious to link cause and effect. Oh, I feel like this, I will take a drink and feel better. If you could smoke or inject alcohol, it would be as addictive as everything else. And people, 80% of the population taking it, 80% of the population would be hopelessly addictive. It's only because we drink it that it takes years and years to become addicted to it.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
It is.
There's quite a wide range of, yeah.
Well, let's go to the next question, shall we? So Liz said, really freaked me out to hear someone on a podcast reporting that after 6 years alcohol-free, they nearly relapsed, got to the queue in Sainsbury's with wine. Oh, right, okay, yeah, they got into the queue in the supermarket and they had wine. They were ready to buy it. I thought, oh my God, is this lifelong? I'm 13 months alcohol-free and feel I'm doing quite well, although need to surround/brainwash myself with lots of podcasts, books, Instagram, etc. Really, I was hoping 6 years down the line, I'd be forgotten about alcohol completely. That's an interesting one.
First thing I think to say there is, you're not brainwashing yourself, you're removing the brainwashing. Because all this hype about alcohol being great and you need it, that's the brainwashing, that's the rubbish. Going onto podcasts and realising the truth about it, it's the complete opposite. And secondly, not everyone quits in the right way, and some people struggle. So some people will go 50 years without a drink, and every day they're white knuckling it, and it's 50-50 whether they take a drink or not, and that's how they do it. It's not working particularly well for them. Other people do all the background work. They totally change their perception of alcohol. They totally revisit their beliefs on it. And before they even quit, they know they've quit and they're happy to quit. Yeah. So this is why, another reason, I don't think you can necessarily gauge success by counting days, because someone who has quit and is absolutely happy with their decision, is glad to see the back of alcohol, has got all their coping mechanisms in place, ready to go, in my book, is more quit than someone who's done 20 years white knuckling it and struggles every single day.
Can
everybody get to that? Sorry, Simon.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, I came up with this kind of theory recently because Annie Grace in This Naked Mind talks a lot about cognitive dissonance and the internal conflict. Obviously, your conscious mind at some point gets triggered to say, alcohol's a problem, you need to stop. Your subconscious wants to carry on because you've had this habit all your life, blah, blah, blah. So I started thinking to myself, well, before this big internal conflict, this war in your head, which is really uncomfortable, erupts, what's before that? And I thought, ignorant bliss. We live in a state of ignorant bliss. And I feel like I solved sobriety with this theory. It seems to have helped a few people anyway. And the point is that you can never go back to ignorant bliss once the internal conflict's begun. The place disappears. There's only one way to go once that seed has started and the war has erupted. And what happens, I call it the drunken dictator, like a military dictator in a battle. We move from one side to the other. We think, actually, my drinking's not that bad. I'm okay, I'll carry on. So then you flare up the conscious mind and the battle erupts. Then you think, oh, I'm going to quit. I am going to quit. Yeah. And then the subconscious flares up and the war erupts again. The only way out is through, and it's to get harmony between both sides, which is through education and expanding your knowledge, podcast, learning, things like this. The sides come into harmony. You're happy in your decision, like William said, and that's it. It ends. The battle's over. But knowing that ignorant bliss has gone and is never there means that even if you think of taking a drink, it's actually pointless. It's just an illusion, because you're never going to go back to where you think it's going to take you. It's just complete bullshit.
Do you think everybody can get to the point of not white knuckling it if they do the right level of educating themselves?
I would say so, yeah, because I think alcohol's great in that respect, in that it's not a particularly nice drug. So there's certain drugs that you take them and they make you feel absolutely euphoric. The main euphoria we get with drinking is because we tend to drink in happy situations, like when we're socializing anyway. But actually, if you just sit somewhere and have an alcoholic drink, it doesn't make you feel particularly good. You feel a bit confused and a bit sort of tunnel vision, and that's it. So I think absolutely you can, and alcohol is a good drug to do that with, because it doesn't do an awful lot for you. There's drugs out there that really do make you feel like you're on top of the world, but alcohol just isn't one of them. The only reason we've fallen into thinking it is because when we start drinking, we tend to drink in happy situations, like when we're socialising.
Yeah.
I think you've got to be careful not to use it as an excuse as well. I remember years and years and years ago when I used to smoke, and I went into a bar and there was a guy there that said he had stopped smoking for like 20 years, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. I was fascinated by non-smokers when I was a smoker, just like non-drinkers when I was a drinker. And I said, do you ever want one? And he said, every day. And I went outside and had a fag. I thought, I'm not going for 20 years wanting a fag. And I used it as an excuse to go and have one. So I think just be careful that it's not that little voice saying, oh, you're going to want one all the time, you're still going to want this in 6 years, go and have one.
Dave, you got anything on that one?
I just think it's in a fear, isn't it? Like, well, I suppose there's not a single one of us that don't worry. I mean, me and Alex, again, we had this chat. We have these secret chats, Lisa. Sorry.
She has them with all of you. She has them. She's like, yeah, you're not the only one, because William sat there thinking, oh, I have them, and then Simon's thinking, oh, I have them.
I thought I was special.
No, you're not special.
She's gone.
For me, I said to Alex that I can pretty much lay everything on the fact I will never drink again. But I suppose there's this tiny little voice in me that is still fearful that one day something terrible might happen and then I might do it. So I think it's quite natural to feel like that, but it's also reframing that voice in your head. And like, as William says, if you like use it for the positive and think, well, you know, I hope I don't like that, say, well, you know, acknowledging it is fine. It's what you do with the acknowledgement. If you're going to let it eat you away a little bit and worry and be nervous and anxious about it, then there's a chance you might think you're a bit weaker about it, you know?
Yeah.
That's my take. And I just won't give it the energy. You know, I did a YouTube thing about, I think, Simon, you got a similar thing about divorcing alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, I did a whole thing about this gorgeous little thing come into my life. And by the end of it, it was this horrible, naggy woman. And then she left and there was no, sorry, Alex, I don't know why. And tapping on the door. And it's whether you open the door or not, you can acknowledge the tapping on the door, but you don't have to answer it. Do you know what I mean? And for me, I listen to it and think, nah, I don't want to go back to that ever again. You know, but it's important for me individually to still acknowledge it.
Yeah, like in our private chats to that nagging woman that you divorced, Dave.
It's all right, gives me a break from her.
Oh, right.
Before you move on, somebody just said there when you were saying about mindset, Dave, that once you realise what alcohol is, once your mindset is changed, it's joy. It's a pleasure to not drink, the joy of missing out. Definitely mindset.
And do you know what Mark said last week? Mark Alderley, he said, when the cost of a drink is more than the money it costs, do you know what I mean? And when you think about that, and also when you no longer drink, as William, you say, we drink for fun, like parties, and it got to a stage in I wasn't drinking for fun because I started drinking indoors and I hated going out, because when I went out, I knew I couldn't drink what I wanted to drink, you know, and that's when it started to become a real problem for me, because I've become really unsociable And that's when I upped it to drinking litres of vodka every night, because I could get away with it.
That just proves the point, though, that it's addictive, doesn't it? Because it went from you socialising and enjoying yourself to having to hide the addiction.
Yeah, but also, like, people talk to me about that, and they say, what is it about drinking you love the most? And it's basically, I love getting pissed. I just love getting pissed, and that's my answer. I just loved it, whatever you know. It wasn't so much, I was hiding from certain things, I suppose, but that was my comfort zone, you know, like on a magic carpet floating about above everything. It was just...
I don't think you connect it sometimes that you are using it to block things out. Like, I remember seeing a post years ago on Facebook, and it said something like, all I want is a bottle of vodka and to shut myself in a room with my earphones and a bottle of vodka. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, I'd love to do that, but never thought to myself, why do you want to do that? I just never connected the two.
Habit, that as well, isn't it? And all the marketing, though, that we're taught that, oh,
yeah, like it was gonna
stress.
Yeah, it's just once you see, you can't unsee, can you?
And I guess that's what you were saying, Sam, isn't it, about how you're not brainwashing yourself by doing the podcast and the books and everything, because what's happened is for years we've been told alcohol relaxes you, alcohol makes you feel good, you need alcohol to go out and socialise, you need alcohol at a funeral, you need alcohol at a wedding. It's
Yeah, exactly.
Doing that subliminal education that's without.
Yeah, and I think the trouble is we add to it ourselves, because of course when the alcohol wears off, you feel insecure and unhappy, and then when you're drinking, you sort of get back to normal. So you start to so if, say for example, every time someone gets home from work at like 6 p.m, they start drinking, what their life is from when they wake up all through the day, they've got this like increased anxiety and insecurity. So any part of their life is more frightening and more unpleasant. Alcohol withdrawal makes you feel like you can't cope with things. And then, of course, they get to the evening, they open the bottle of wine or vodka or beer or whatever and start drinking it. And suddenly everything looks okay again. And they don't worry about their problems because they know they can deal with them. So you start to get into this thing. That's why we believe the advertising. It's because we do all the work ourselves.
Yeah.
The mechanism is that we end up thinking we need alcohol to cope with our problems and to be able to face them. But the reality is alcohol stops you being able to cope with your problems and then sort of partially restores that ability. But we confuse it because it's when we're drinking that we get the boost. It's when the alcohol has worn off that we start to feel that actually life isn't very nice. It's all a bit scary.
Marketing's genius, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Next.
Right, let's go to the next question, which is from Anne. She said, I'm almost at 6 months alcohol free, no desire to drink, but after 7 months, I've abandoned being vegan as I felt my body needed to have one less restriction. However, any advice, as I'm worried I may go back to drinking alcohol, as I did not think I would go back to eating eggs or fish. Thank you. I mean, I guess that's along the same lines of that mindset that William was talking about. If it's not fully and keep on working on that, that's what I would say anyway. Who else wants to pick up?
I would say there as well, I think you need to recognise the difference between a rational decision and sort of giving into an addiction, because it sounds like what you've done there is got a bit bored of the lack of vegan options, so you've decided to let a bit of milk and dairy back into your dairy and meat back into your diet. There's a rational reason for that. Addiction is not rational. We tend to make excuses and try and garner excuses to justify what we're doing. But there's a difference between making a conscious decision based on all the available information, and then maybe a few years down the line things have changed, so you change the decision, to giving in to temptation. Now, if you're comfortable in your sobriety, that's fine. And if you've made a decision that you actually want to start eating meat, that's a completely different dynamic as far as I would see it.
I think picking up on what she said as well about she didn't want another restriction. You know, it's like, are you seeing not drinking as a restriction still? So maybe working on your mindset around that as well.
Yeah, that should be freedom.
Yeah.
No restriction.
And maybe she was just bored of powdered eggs, to be fair.
Yeah.
That's a private joke, everybody. Don't worry about that.
Right, moving swiftly on then.
No, I actually thought you could get vegan eggs in a shell and actually have them with breakfast. And Lisa said, no, you're an idiot. It's just for baking with.
Right, the next question says, I've cut alcohol out since early June. Trying my best, though, sitting in the garden in the sun is normally a trigger to crack open the vino. Will most likely be socialising with my good friends who happen to be neighbours, definitely partners in crime when it comes to wine in the garden over the weekend. Not ready yet to say that I'm trying to stop drinking. So any suggestions on how to play it? I'm not hiding it, but just not ready to put it out there yet. Though I did buy a bottle of alcohol-free sparkling wine today, so I'm more than happy to drink that. From Angela.
You know, this is really tough because I think if you're not going to be upfront and maybe not say I've quit drinking, but at least address the fact that on that day you are not prepared to have a drink, you're leaving yourself open to people trying to persuade you to have a drink. So for me, I think you might not be ready to say I've quit drinking for good, but you might want to say something like, I'm taking 30 days off alcohol and I'm not having any sex. That's that, because I think otherwise I don't know everyone else's thoughts on that, but I think you potentially leave yourself open to persuasion and you will give in without a game plan.
Yeah,
it's a tough one, that, isn't it? I remember my mum doing this, you know, when she used to have the same friend come round every single Saturday night, and they would drink copious amounts of red wine and rant at the television, blah, blah, blah. And she was frightened to tell a friend that she wasn't drinking, to the point that she laughs at herself now. She's like, I can't believe that I was going to do it. But she was going to pour non-alcoholic red wine into a red wine bottle so she didn't have to tell a friend that she weren't drinking. Like, now she laughs at it, but I think you've got to remember and kind of take yourself back, where it's a big step. It can be, the thought of going sober forever can be really scary. So I think William, you're quite good at this, aren't you? You just said to people like, I don't fancy it today.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because I've mentioned this before, but I think if you say, well, obviously if it's a neighbour, you're not going to be driving, but if you're saying it's a health kick or it's a this, that, or the other, people will start to try and talk you into it. But if you just say, I don't fancy drinking tonight, there's not very much they can say about it.
My mates would have done. That's the thing, though. That's serious. My mates would have hounded me. So all I can say is, if you keep it small, and I mean, you could even, I mean, I don't particularly agree with it long term, the antibiotic thing, but if you're really panicking about that evening, you can say, oh, the doctor's put me on antibiotics, so I can't drink, just to get you over that little hurdle, and then talk to them after. Because someone I know the other day, she had this thing with all the girls and that, and I just said, keep it, minimalise it to a point that it's not a big deal, you know, and just say, look, it wasn't the antibiotic thing, but it was, look, just, I've been feeling pretty crap lately, I'm not sleeping, I'm just going to give it a couple of days off. It's not such a big thing then.
If you're using the antibiotic one, say metronidazole, because they make you actually vomit and you're advised to not drink on them. And the old ones, metronidazole, they're for lady problems.
Oh, right.
Put them. I know firsthand how you should never drink on them. My God. No.
I'd say as well, just Dave's friends aside, mostly I think we build these things up to be much bigger than they are. And most people don't really care what you're doing as long as they're happy with what they're doing. A lot of the time you kind of think that you're going to go to this social occasion and you're going to say, I'm not drinking, and it's just going to be deathly silence while everyone looks around aghast at you. Whereas most of the time people, they don't really care. And if people are drinking and they've got their own drinks, it's like they might comment on it and there'll be a bit of banter around it, but the conversation moves on. So I think that's what I found. Obviously, often I would think it was going to be this massive thing, and actually it wasn't. Most people didn't care. And I find quite often I can go to functions and just pour a drink, and people just don't realise whether you're drinking or not. To such an extent, a friend of my wife's, I was out one evening, and we've socialised with these people over the last, 4 or 5 years. So I've been out regularly with them. And for that period, I've never been drinking. I was talking to her and she said, oh, what are you drinking? It was like, lemonade or orange juice or something. And she went, oh, are you not drinking tonight? And she said something like, oh, what's it like not drinking? And I said, well, I haven't drunk since I've known you. And she was really shocked, because when people are drinking, they just assume everyone else is drinking. They're just not really paying much attention to what's going on. So
That's a really good tactic, holding a drink anyway. And if you've got one in your hand, nobody has the space to say what you want. So just keep your drink full of your non-alcoholic choice.
Because some people are uncomfortable if you're not drinking. I think that can be a worry as well. I know I've been out and they're like, what do you mean you're not drinking? And they start getting all uncomfortable about their own drinking or apologising for drinking. I remember going to a party really early on and taking the non-alcoholic Prosecco, and as soon as I had the glass in my hand, like you said, nobody bothered me then, because
I've been in situations as well where I've been in a restaurant and the waiters have come round and served wine, and you're talking to someone, and before you can say anything, they've poured a drink. And rather than make a fuss, and just leave it there. And then again, everyone just assumes you are drinking because you've got a glass in front of you and no one really paid any attention to it.
But that could be triggering some people, couldn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they're quite new in their journey and they got a glass of wine there, it could be dodgy. Just move it away, maybe, you know. And
there's always the option.
But you've also got to be prepared, I think, for things like this. I think we can't
run away
pretend that when we go out or that nobody else is going to be drinking. So as much as it is going to be triggering, I think that's something that you do have to prepare for as well.
Yeah.
I think that's all around embracing I didn't go anywhere socially for the first couple of months after I quit until I felt really ready for it. And when I did go, I made sure I had someone with me who had my back and an exit strategy. And I was, I felt really prepared. I'd visualized what it was going to be like, written it down in my journal. And so I think you've got to, it's your environment. I think Craig Beck says if we sit in a barber's long enough, we're going to get a haircut. Not that I would, but it's that same theory, isn't it? It's that same thing, isn't it? Like if you're going to keep going to the pub, inevitably you're going to drink. So, and I found that I didn't want to do those things. I just found them boring. So I'd rather go and do a boot camp or go to
But going back to the original question, if her neighbours and that are, it's a big old drinker. Like, as you say, Lisa, preparing for it is really important. So having that conversation before the evening reduces the pressure on the evening of, like what my mates used to do is have a beer, what's the matter with you and whatever, and they kept passing me a beer. And luckily I didn't cave in. But it's having that conversation, just saying that I really would appreciate if you supported me, because I'm just giving alcohol a break at the moment. And then, it's part of the sober toolbox, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and isn't it a good thing? I love not drinking, me. I love these Saturdays, and I love, honestly, isn't it good that we don't drink?
It is.
It is, isn't it?
Quite a lot of the clients I work with have actually had that same fear where they've got a close friend. And in fact, one of them has got a neighbour that was their drinking buddy. And I think William said around, we often make it out to be something that, we build it up to be bigger than it really is. And when they do talk to them, inevitably, it isn't a big thing. They open up, they're vulnerable. You don't talk about it in an environment where booze is around. Maybe you have a coffee and say, look, I'm taking a break. I'd love for you to support me. I see you as a really close friend. I mean, unless they don't like you, they're not going to support you and help you on that journey. Yeah. So I think reaching out. Right, should we go? I think I've got one more question here.
You've got two more, I think, Simon.
Oh, two more, and then we can do some from the live comments.
Yeah.
So Gary said, I'd like to understand why some people feel that it's always going to be a lifelong battle with alcohol. I think we've sort of touched on this, haven't we?
Yeah.
For me, the battle with booze was happening before I stopped. Once I had stopped, alcohol was no longer anything I needed to fight. In fact, it was time to learn about all the other aspects of my life, and some of that became my battle.
I think we talked about that. I think
yeah, that's it.
I think we answered that earlier with what we were saying about if you educate yourself, you can't unlearn that then. And
it's that relief, I think, as well. When somebody's been battling with it for that long, or they've been battling to try and moderate or to try and to just kind of take it all away, it can be a big relief for somebody. Like,
oh, she's frozen.
I argue with myself. Am I back?
You're back.
Did I finish?
Do you know what we was talking about? the anxiety earlier, when you give up drinking, most of my anxiety was through drinking anyway. Like the whole thought of the minute I got up, look, the girls are off, look. We're waking up on a Monday morning feeling really, really stressed. I'm the only one trying to keep it together here. Right.
She just like, you don't bloody know. How do we know?
Because you said that froze. Sorry, Dave. Go
That's right.
on.
Going back to anxiety was a lot. Once I'd given up drinking, I didn't have the anxiety of me constantly thinking about the bloody drinking anyway. Of how am I going to get away with drinking again tonight when I've got pissed all weekend, and you know, so many things that haunted me, which made me feel really anxious, and then hiding the booze, and then trying to remember. So that's another aspect about the anxiety of giving up. I know I skipped back a bit, but at least I'm not bloody laughing, eh?
No, exactly.
It makes a change. We've saved you lot loads of times.
Hey!
Do you know, can I just say something about this actually? My dad was an alcoholic, and he obviously he's no longer with us. He died 10 years ago, but prior to that he was sober for 10 years. And he battled, and I think that before we even admit we've got a problem with alcohol, all of us will know that battle that goes on in your head for years, the battle you don't tell anybody about. And you know you're drinking too much, but you don't want to give it up because you think you enjoy it and all the rest of it. And, you know, I remember my dad saying many, many, many times, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, so what? So he knew he'd done the admittance, but he'd not done the acceptance. And I think that's why some people who have to stop drinking because he was told he had to and so on do have that battle, because they never truly come to accept the issue. They never truly accept they're doing it for other reasons rather than doing it for themselves, maybe. So instead of actually wanting to give up alcohol because they know that that's the right thing to do for themselves, they might be doing it because somebody's given them an ultimatum, and they might never have got to the point where you did, William, where you might have been given an ultimatum, but you must have known in order to give up. You must have known there was an issue. And I think some people forget to that, and that's why they're not prepared to, or not even aware that they could do work on themselves, they could educate themselves. So I think the more you can, you know, surround yourself with this kind of material, the more chance you've got of not having to white knuckle it for all those years.
Yeah, and I think also with that, don't forget as well, if you're coming at it from like the old-fashioned view of it, alcohol is this wonderful substance that you need to enjoy life, but some poor few percentage of the population have got something physically or spiritually wrong with them, which means they become addicted to it. So those poor souls are just going to be miserable either way, because they either drink themselves to death or they quit drinking and spend the rest of their lives miserable because they can't have this wonderful substance. That was the old way of quitting drinking. So it's not a happy way of doing things. It's not a good way of doing it, because you're damned either way. So
yeah, you do have to embrace the positivity.
You do, and I think you have to understand as well, it's not what it is made out to be. You do not need alcohol to enjoy or cope with life. You don't need it. Yeah, but you need to understand why you don't need it. You need to go through the work to really embrace that. And that, when you get to that stage, that's when you're not resisting temptation. You've just removed temptation. It's just not something you want anymore.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Simon. I think you've written a bit in your book about that. If you want to reach behind you and just get your book there.
Oh, hang on, yeah, I'll just do that. Which one do you want? So I'm in my beach house now. I've just moved to another room. I haven't got the books anymore.
Oh, you've ruined the illusion, Dave.
Oh, I like that book. Put the bookshelf back.
No, I'm going to the disco.
Right, what's the last question?
We've got one more, I think, haven't we, Simon, before we move to Facebook?
Yeah, I can't see it for the disco lights. Hold on. Right, yeah, we've got one more. Charlie says, hi, lovely.
My mum.
So we're off on the wrong foot straight away. I'm going to be out sofa shopping for my new house this afternoon, so I will miss the sober sessions, but I have a question for it if you wouldn't mind, so I can catch up later. My mum is extremely alcohol dependent, and through my teens and early adulthood, I did everything I could to get her to stop. It's always made our relationship tricky. It's only now that I've stopped drinking that I realise her habits and attitude to drink were the main thing which caused my own drinking issues. I'd never tell her that. Dave made me realise early on that you should never pressure anyone to stop drinking, as it will be counterintuitive. But when I became sober, she decided she would try this Naked Mind 30-day experiment, but now has gone back to drinking, and it's straining our relationship. It's strained our relationship in a different way as I'm sober, and she continues to be in denial and display behaviours which I can now see are so ingrained because of her addiction. How can I stop this from ruining our relationship? I find myself feeling resentment for her as she won't get help or admit her problems.
I think this is about boundaries again. I mean, my mum drinks, my sister drinks. I really wish they would stop, but that's unfortunately their decision. I drop in the odd preachy remark every now and again. I can't help myself, but where possible, I've just set boundaries. You know, you're not going to drink around me. If you want to see me, you know where I am. Come and have a coffee. I'll come to you and have a coffee. If I get there and you're drunk, I'm going to leave. And I made that very clear on a day when they weren't drinking. They know, I know, and it wasn't easy for me to say, but I've set my boundaries and they are respecting them. I wish that they would stop with me, but then that's up to them. So I've just said, look, if you're having a drink, I won't be there. And they've got no choice but to accept that. That's how I've dealt with it.
It's just so sad that, I think, innit? I can really relate to that. I'm really lucky that my mum stopped drinking after seeing me stop drinking, and she's been sober like coming up to 2 years herself now, which is fantastic. But I think we've done a little bit of work with NACOA, and honestly, it doesn't matter what age you are, you can contact them, can't you? If you're a child of an alcoholic, no matter how old you are. I would really recommend watching maybe our sober session that we did with Josh as well on one of our YouTube channels.
Because I think he's still in the group as well.
Yeah, I think it was really good that for... Yeah, I just really feel for it. It's awful when it's your parent. It's just really, really sad.
You can want it for somebody else all you want, though, can't you? But
yeah,
it is like Dave says, it is ultimately their decision to make that change. You can want it, but you know, there's only you can let it damage your relationship as well. You're either going to put up with it and accept it, you're going to set boundaries around it, or you're going to move away from it. And they're your only options, really. I think, you know. And you have to ask yourself, right, what am I prepared to put up with? For me, I love being around my mum and my sister. I just don't want them to drink around me, not because I can't cope with it, but it breaks my heart to watch it absolutely breaks my heart to watch what's going on under my nose, and then to feel I can't do anything about it. So, and I've told them my reasons. I don't like this anymore. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I can't bear to see this happening to you. So you used to do it in front of me, and
part of it as well.
On a high horse, but tough.
Do you think part of it is as well is triggering her feelings around alcohol as well? You know, we talked about the drama triangle before, and like when she has a bit too much, I very much become the victim in it myself. It's like you're getting pissed, I'm not. But part of that is as well, I know I can't because of this and that, and I become the victim. So maybe it's equally owning some of that part of it. You can't rescue your mum, you know, and you can't help somebody who's not going to help themselves and that. And maybe owning I know it's excellent what you're saying, Alex, about the boundaries, but part of it is as well that is digging deeper in yourself and wondering why you are triggered by that.
If that's your reasons, yeah. I think if that's your reasons, if your reasons are it because it triggers you, and I don't mean this in a put down way, that's a selfish reason. So that's your reason because it's affecting you. So you can control that. You can control that, like you say. But if your reason is because of the way that it's affecting them and it comes from a different place, I think you either have to take yourself out of that situation or put boundaries around it. I think that really does massively depend, and it's well said that depends on what it is about the situation that is ruining your relationship. Is it about yourself in that situation, or is it about them in that situation? So I think that's a valid point, Dave.
And take that one step further as well, is when you go into a situation, you've got intent, is, you know, and there's only two types of intent. One is to go in there with a sense of protection, where it's all about you. I'm going to be anxious or worried or angry or sad, to feel like, even though we do it subconsciously, just to protect ourselves. Or you go in there with love for self, love for others, acceptance of others, and they're two completely different things. I was really interested. I read something about it earlier in the week about meditation. Some people use meditation to try and get away from a problem or to feel less anxious, and others do it from a place of love for themselves, and they're two totally different things. So actually doing some work around self-love and love and acceptance for others is probably worth looking at as well, and thinking about what intent you're going into this with. I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, but it's...
No, I don't think it does. I think it just backs up what Dave and I have just said about the two perspectives on it. I think
being truthful with your mum is quite important, because I think if you're not, you can cross the line of kind of enabling somebody it. Then. Yeah, so that's something that you've got to be really careful of. It's hard, so hard to set them boundaries. And I know
it's taken me years, hasn't it, Lisa?
Yeah. Years. Yeah, as in to say it, like, I know what Alex is like. She'll say, "Oh, just tell them this, blah, blah, blah," and that's that. And it's not like that. It can be so difficult, but I'd read and have a look into enabling as well, because you've got to be so careful of it.
Yeah, because you can enable without even realising you're enabling. By not challenging is enabling.
Yeah, especially when you love somebody so much. You don't want to hurt the feelings. You don't want them not to like you. You don't want them to be mad at you. And I think something I read quite a while ago was, if that person around you does really like you and they love you at this moment and they're not mad at you, then are you enabling them a little bit? It's tough, and I think, you know, get some help with it as well, if you need it.
Yeah, NACOA is a good place to do that.
Yeah,
you do have to have an element of toughness to you as well with that, like Lisa's saying, to not enable and to make sure that you can challenge it. But I would also say timing is everything with that, because going back some years, when I've challenged it in the wrong moment or in the wrong way. So I'd kind of wait until they were pissed up and then go, "Oh, I'm so annoyed, I'm sick of you ruining things." And that's not the right time or approach to do it. The right time or approach to do it is when you're in a safe environment, when you are sober, when they're sober, when you can have a rational conversation about why you don't want it in front of you. So it's very complex, and and I've made it sound very matter of fact, I've done this, but in reality it's taken me 15 years to get there.
Something just to add there as well, I think, is, and this may sound really brutal, that there's only so much you can do to help people, and if you need to realise that yourself, it's not always within your power to help someone, and you unfortunately sometimes you just have to accept that.
Yeah, I think, like Simon says as well, if it comes from a place of love, how they react to it is not, there's nothing you can do about that, is it? You know, if you're being truthful and honest and coming from a really good place, their reaction is not your responsibility. So just be strong with it, I think.
Can I ask a question from Nicola, who I followed right from the beginning of her journey? She's doing absolutely brilliantly, by the way. One of the hardest things for me to deal with since becoming sober is regret. I wrestle with those feelings daily, and I wish I'd given up sooner to save the pain from situations. Or my ex I adored with all my heart, but my drinking and behaviour caused us to break up. He just couldn't take it anymore. I regret more than anything losing him, which is really hard to hear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyone?
I think anyone who has ever been a destructive drinker has something that they wish they hadn't done. I really do. I think we can all sit here now and we wish something was different. And the sad reality of it is you can't go back and undo it. All you can do is work on yourself now and going forwards, knowing you're not going to repeat those behaviours, forgiving yourself, because, you know, you've got to forgive yourself because you can't change it. You have to come to some sort of acceptance of the situation, and in time hope that you can approach them if that's what you want, for them to forgive you. I mean, I don't necessarily think that repairs the relationship, but I know I have gone back and apologized to people. I've done that. It's up to them how they take that, but I've done my bit now. I've accepted things, and I have actually spoken to individuals and said, I'm really sorry that I did this to you, or I said this to you. It's not easy, that. It's really not easy. I actually really feel for Nicola. Really feel.
It's really difficult, that one.
It is difficult. I think one of the things to bear in mind, though, and this isn't to absolve everyone of anything they've done, but alcohol does change the way your brain works, and it makes you do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. It's not necessarily your culpability for that action all the time. It's because you were drinking alcohol. And to my mind anyway, when you do something that you regret, the only thing you can really do is take action to make sure you never do it again. You can't change it. You can just make sure it never happens again. And if you've done horrible things when you're drinking, you take that step by quitting drinking. That's the best thing you can do, because you're making sure none of those things will ever happen again. With personal relationships as well, I think one of the dynamics there that's difficult is you turn around to someone. So say you're in a relationship and you get drunk and do something horrible, and they say you've done something horrible, and you say, oh, I'll quit. And then 2 minutes later, you're drinking again. And this goes on for years and years and years. So that when you do reach a point that you have properly quit, you in your heart of hearts, this is what happened to me. I knew I'd quit when I quit, but my wife didn't, because I've said it so many times before and drunk again. So I knew it would take time. It would take weeks, months, even years. I knew it was different, but it would take that amount of time for her to realise it was different this time. You will get there. So maybe that person who's lost, or a lot of the time it's children or parents or whatever that you've alienated, it takes time, and that's all you can do. You can quit drinking, and you can stay quit drinking, and slowly, not all the time, but slowly, a lot of these things can be repaired.
Such a relief to know that it's not the real you, because you kind of get told that from being a teenager. I think, you do stuff and then people say, oh, you say things what you really mean when you're drunk, or you do things that you really mean. Like, I'm so glad I'm not that person in real life.
I wrecked a friendship by being that drunk, and I was on Facebook and I commented on something, and he said the next day, I cannot believe you pressed send. Because if I was sober, I would have phoned him, I would have waited or whatever, and I didn't. I reacted because I was so drunk, and I pressed send, and then the next day I looked at it was literally a ream of, why have you done this to me? What in public, and luckily we're okay now, but it will never be the same. And I've even explained to him now that I had a really terrible drinking problem, and that's helped, but I don't think it'll ever repair. But you have to do it to forgive yourself as well, don't you? You have to move on, and that self-forgiveness is so healing, because you weren't in a safe state of mind, really. When I wasn't. I was all over the place with it, and I feel okay now. I feel rehabilitated in a way. Say I've done my time, and now I've come out the other side and think, well, I'm rehabilitated now, and I won't do it again. As William says, it's I've learned my lesson from it, and that's all you can do, really. I mean, you can't turn back the clock, can you?
No, and I think
a really good
when you're not just when you're drunk or when you're under the influence of alcohol, that whole period where you are drinking, you're not quite yourself. Certainly not in the years leading up to you quitting.
Yeah.
I know a lot of things I did stone cold sober, but I did when I was in a really dark place.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I think, oh my God, that wasn't their fault, or I snapped at somebody, or I did this for attention, and it was all because of the place I was in, which was leading to me drinking anyway.
I think awareness is good as well. And I think Nicola sounds like she's quite aware of things. And that's the first step, because forgiving yourself is hard. Another thing that we all say, forgive yourself. But to actually, yourself, when you've got it in your head and you're like, oh, that feeling's awful. So practice. And I know it sounds like they're cliche with your self-care and your self-love, but it's so important that you maybe write it down. Maybe, you don't have to send the letter, but I'm just thinking, what about writing it down and then speaking to that and saying what you'd want to say? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's the other thing as well. You can send the letter, but unconditionally. Because if you send
don't expect the response.
Yeah, because otherwise that's going to mess you up a little bit as well. But right, as you say, Lisa, I yodeled then. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Your voice broke, Dave.
Writing it down is really, really powerful. It really is.
Simon, you might just get it out. You might want to write it down and then set it on fire. But I think negative thoughts, they can take over so much. And I read this or watched it on somebody else's video actually, and they were saying write down them negative thoughts and then talk to them like you would your best friend or your child, and it's just practice, I think, at turning it around.
Well, the other thing, Nicola, is just forget all about it and keep baking those lovely cakes. Because I know I've seen on Instagram her and her daughter do lots of baking. I want her to send me a nice cake.
Well, there's 5 now. We need 5
more.
No, so
we've got more on Facebook then. And I don't know if we're going to get through them all. I don't know how many there are, but the first one is from Lawrence. Haven't been out yet. Do you have any tips or advice to remain sober with drinkers? I feel confident but still a bit anxious. Thank you guys for all your help so far.
I'd stay away from them. Why do you need to be with them?
It's a tough one that we covered this a little bit in last week's session, didn't we?
Don't go near them.
That's the end of that. Next one.
Sam's tired now. That's that.
Look, Simon's ready to go home.
No,
out of the disco. He's had a late night out of the disco.
Yeah, hang on. Let me do somewhere more soothing. It's my background.
Yeah, come on, everything.
Nicola's going to send us a cake, so that's something.
I think there's a point of maybe staying away, but also the other thing you can do is just to be prepared for that situation. Call the venue ahead, check they've got the non-alcoholic drinks that you want, plan what you're going to drink, visualize it, write it down like Simon advises. There's in this kind of situation, for me, preparation is everything. If you're going around a load of drinkers, thinking through exactly what you're going to do is your best tactic for me.
And have an exit strategy always.
Yeah, and like Williams.
Your exit strategy.
When you want to go on, because nobody notices anyway.
Right, let's get through these questions.
Okay.
Dave's had enough now.
I'm going to turn you.
Dave lost interest as well.
I'm so hot in this office.
I'm surprised you're not sat in your pants already. Open the
I am, imagine I'm not. Hold on.
I hope has he gone to open the door or has he gone off? Right. How long would you say, this is from Colette, how long would you say early days lasts? I'm just over a year and I'm still eating really badly.
Oh.
William, this is for you.
It should be over by then, I think. Yeah. It's long enough. Yeah.
We're not taking any prisoners today.
I think it's just time. Rather than calling it early days, you've probably got your sobriety together now, and now is the time to work on diet. You're probably at the same stage that I am at 13 months, and you've just kind of slipped into a few bad habits to replace the drinking, and now is the time. Your sobriety is going to be fine as long as you keep working on it and start working on your diet and your exercise. Do it with me. I'm starting on Monday.
There you go.
Do you think in a year's time we're going to be really, really impatient and insensitive? So when it comes to this again, we'd be like, just get on with it. What's your problem?
What's wrong with you?
Why
are we all sat here together? Just get on with your lives.
Yeah, dump him. Get rid of her.
It's so easy to forget, I think, like early sobriety, isn't it? Because you just grow so much. As soon as you stop drinking, you go through so many different changes. You forget what it's like, I think.
Do you know what I will say?
Particularly those first few days, because don't forget as well, that first couple of weeks, your brain chemistry is out of sync. So you're still kind of all over the place and nervous because your brain isn't, literally, the chemistry is wrong in it. It's still getting back to a decent level. And when you get there, you start to feel a lot more resilient and confident, and everything then becomes a bit more manageable.
Yeah. But I think you're bang on with that. And I think the thing is with it, not everybody's early days is the same. And it's so hard to answer that question because, you know, some people breeze through that first 30 days and then start to struggle 6 months in when in certain aspects. You know, other people really struggle. I was surprised how much I struggled during the first 30 days. I woke up the day after I decided to stop and couldn't think of anything other than drinking wine. And it was on a Monday morning. I had never, ever thought of wine on a Monday morning until the day I shut it out of my life. So I think, you know, there is a lot going on in those early days. And then beyond that, if you're like me, I make excuses. Well, I'm sober, so I deserve a cake. You know, I do. I make excuses, and that's the reality of it. There's only me can stop getting fatter. That might sound blunt, but it's true.
That's why I'm still skint. I keep buying stuff because I don't buy wine. I'm like, I can afford that now. I can afford that. It used to be like, this costs the same as a bottle of wine. Now I'm like, this costs the same as like 10 cases of wine.
I've just
I've easily saved that.
Okay, just wondering if you think counting days is important or not. That's from Liam. William, you touched on this earlier where you said you'd rather concentrate on how well you're dealing with the sobriety rather than the number of days you've been sober.
Yeah, I think it's a very personal thing that some people it's really useful for them to see those days building up. And other people don't really like it. They just want to, right, now my new life starts and that's it. So I think it's a very personal thing. If it works for you, do it. If it doesn't, don't. It really is that simple.
Yeah,
but look at them as days of freedom. Not as like, I know some people like to look at the days and think, oh, this is so long I've not had a drink for, when actually it's like, this is how many days I've been free.
Yeah, that's an important one, because that's another thing. People can kind of feel like they're kind of limping from day to day until things change. Yeah. And of course, there is the physiological side of it, but the rest of it changes when you decide it's going to change. When you get into that right mindset and you do the homework and you get that right mindset and see alcohol exactly as it is, that's when it changes. You don't get there by getting 10 days or 100 days or 1,000 days of sobriety.
Count the money instead, or count percentage. You can count percentage. If you've had maybe a setback, 1 day out of 50 or whatever, it's like 98% success rate if I've done my maths right. But but a lot of people think, well, I have to go back to day one, and there's this obsession around it. I agree with William. It's a very personal choice. Try it, see if it's for you. I was obsessing over that app in the first week or two. I was willing it to change to the next day, and it was like lunchtime. And I was like looking at it thinking it was going to swap to the next day. But I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't looked at mine in a month, maybe something like that. I
only looked at mine to tell you how many days sober I'd been when you were asking us. That was it.
When did you last look at yours, Dave?
What are we talking about now?
Dave's gone to sleep in his hot room, don't worry.
It's a cardboard cutout. It's not really.
I'm fitting with my pants.
Are you all right, Dave? Have you got hypothermia or?
No. It's the other one, heat exhaustion. No, I was 500 days a little while ago, and then I looked on my phone when I was going to be 18 months, which is the 7th of July at 11:04. So I don't really count at all.
I'm going to look at mine now.
No, I used to count the days, and now it's like landmarks. Do you know what I mean? So 500 days, 18 months, then it'd be 2 years, where before it used to be 17 days, 18 days. But you're right, Lisa, what you say. It's reframing the conversation from, I haven't had a drink for 17 days to, I haven't had a drink for 17 days. That's brilliant. And that mindset really helps you.
Can I just show you my days? Because I've just looked at it and it's like the best number ever because I see this number everywhere. But can you see that?
Oh!
Hey.
Look! 1 year, 11 months, 11 days. I've got a screenshot that.
Well, there's your post sorted out for tomorrow then, Lise.
No, I did one at 700 days. I look at mine all the time.
Right,
Oh,
we've got loads of really nice comments. So afterwards, we will all read through them on the Facebook because there's so many nice things, but we just haven't got time to read them out. My question is, and this is from Jan, have any of you relapsed during your sober time? I'm just going to answer this straight from me now. Since I decided I would not drink again, no. The times when I always pretended I was going to stop drinking, yeah, if you want to count them. But when I made my mind up, my mind was made up. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm same as you. Exactly that. Lots of day ones. And then when I finally got my subconscious and conscious mind in harmony, that was it. Never going back.
I started with a 100-day challenge, and about 40 days in, I went out for a drink, and I was quite pressured actually with my husband at the time, and I had a bottle of Prosecco and some gins. I watched the night turn to shit and realised that I was doing the right thing, and I absolutely never ever wanted to drink again. So I'd got to about 34. I was gutted because I had to start my timer again, but I had two running alongside each other for quite a while, because I kind of looked at it as that was just one day that helped me realise that I wanted to stop, but I really wanted the absolute number as well. So yeah, I suppose I did really. I'm on the actual full number. I deleted the other one once I was happy with the number after a year.
I've actually relapsed since I've come onto this panel talking about it. No, I haven't. I am. Sorry. No, not at all. I haven't. But, you know, some people that do, it's a learning curve. I know people that have tried 5, 6, 7 times, and I look at it like snakes and ladders. You've just got to get up and start again and fry a big 6. Do you like that?
Is it right that it gets worse after each relapse? Because I've read this quite a lot, that people seem to, that have relapsed a lot, that it gets harder and harder each time. Is that true? What do you think?
Who are you talking to?
Anyone that'll answer.
I think it gets harder from what I've heard going back through day one, because you know how tough those first few days were the first time. And so it gets harder to know you're going to have to go through it again.
Yeah.
What about you, William?
I don't know. Yeah, there's a few dynamics there. I think a lot of the time, if you're building up to stopping and you're, I don't know, changing your mindset or getting plans in place, it's like a springboard. You're like building up to it and you go for it. And then going through the same motions again doesn't seem so effective. And I think there's a trap of almost, if you're not changing anything, you're almost setting yourself up for fail. Because if your formula is you wake up feeling rubbish, you promise you're going to stop, and then by 6 in the evening you're drinking again, there's nothing changing each day. So you are literally just setting yourself up to fail. So I would always say, when you relapse, try and make it work for you. You need to use it as a stepping stone to finally getting where you want to be. And for me, that was really analysing everything while I was drinking, really thinking about how it makes you feel. And I'm not talking about the next day, because we all know that's rubbish. I'm talking about the actual drinking, because at the end of the day, what we think we're getting out of alcohol is why we all go through this misery in the first place. So really start concentrating on those drinks while you're drinking them and see what you're actually getting out of it. And if you do that every time you relapse, you will end up with a very, very different conception of alcohol.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. I know Annie Grace says it, to actually carry on drinking at the start of her book if you're not ready to stop altogether. So I think that's quite a good point, where, you know, whether or not you decided to quit or you're thinking about it, is to just remain really conscious when you are drinking, and actually think about the feeling it's giving you, think about what it's doing for your life at the time you're drinking it. And that can be enough to kind of set you into motion to work on yourself anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, Simon, 5:30.
We've got one more last question, and it is one more, and then we can call off. Is everyone all right with one quick one? Because I don't know the answer anyway. It's is addiction more common in people who've been adopted? all I can go off is what Dr. Gabor Mate says, in that any form of childhood trauma, early childhood trauma, or anything else makes you more prone to addiction. And as being depending on the circumstances in which you were adopted and at what age, I would say that is a trauma.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Exactly. I mean, we don't know the ins and outs of it, but there's probably more of a chance depending on the circumstances.
It must depend on the adoption as well. I would think if you're adopted very young and had an otherwise lovely childhood, you're
Precisely.
probably better off than if you're adopted in your, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old and gone into a family that you're desperately unhappy with.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'd agree. Dave's melting.
Dave's melting. I'm melting. My dad's been
it's-
sat here quietly in the corner the whole time as well. He's melting.
It's one of those
Wants the
questions.
toilet.
It's one of those questions that you could answer for half an hour, that one, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It is.
There's so many different, as William says, so many different situations that it could include. It's a hard one to end on.
Because I think even if you're adopted at a very, very young age, like even as a baby, that could have effects forever with...
Well, trauma begins in the womb, and they say that, you know, and you know, I've read a lot about that. I know somebody very close to me that I won't name, but he was adopted because his mother was a drug addict and she was taking drugs while he was in the womb. And then he was adopted very early in life, before 6 months, but had problems with addiction himself later on. And he had a fantastic upbringing by his adoptive parents. He always knew the circumstances. It was open. There was no big bombshell. You'd been adopted. They brought him up knowing he was adopted, and he still suffered. So I think there's a lot in science we don't actually understand about addiction, trauma. So it's I think that's a really tough question to answer with a black and white answer.
Yeah,
that's the same as my ex-husband. That he was adopted as a baby and was brought up, had a lovely childhood, but suffered with addiction and still does. Has stopped drinking, but has transferred that to another addiction now.
So this is a little interesting thing to throw in as well. Fibromyalgia and Sjogren's and these sort of autoimmune things that people don't really know what they are or why they come about or what causes them or anything. But one of the factors that they've identified with similarities with people that have it is that they change countries before the age of 5. So that's something really, so even if you're within a happy family and it's a comfortable change, it's just, who knows what these, I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know,
I was talking to Simon the other day about it. There's something called the ACE scale. And if you just go on and search the ACE scale, it's about childhood trauma. Give yourself a point score, and based on that point score will tell you how likely you are to suffer from addiction, illness. Because autoimmune diseases, like you've just said as well, you know, like arthritis, all of those, fibromyalgia, ME, everything, they reckon you're more prone to those actual physical illnesses if you've suffered from trauma as a child as well. So it's really complex, really complex.
Right,
tough one to end on, really, but maybe we can talk about that on another one, you know.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get Dr. Mate on, shall we?
That would be lovely. I could listen to him all night, all day. Who've we got on next week then, guys?
We've got Ben Robinson, haven't we, who's amazing. He writes a brilliant blog every week on a Sunday, and I met him the other week and we had a little walk into the woods and shared pants. I don't know if anyone's seen the picture. Look at William's face, look.
Yeah, you don't want to think if you're both in the same pants.
That's what I was thinking. You're both squeezing into the same pair of pants.
No. Back to the jeans. But what was funny was that's the first time I've ever met him. And we sat in Wimbledon Common, and then all of a sudden a load of families come along, so we had to go somewhere else just to do this. And we were deep into the woods, and I was thinking, well, you know, who says sober people don't have fun? Anyway, Ben's on next week, and he's 28, and he had a seizure at the bus stop when he was with his mum and was put into hospital. He escaped from hospital. His story is so fascinating, and he thinks from a really intelligent mindset, you know. So next week's going to be really interesting.
we'll look forward to it.
Simon, have you got that website? Have you still got the link for the ACE scale?
Yeah, I've got it. I'll post it in the
Pop
comments.
it in the comments. Yeah, somebody's asking about it. We've got coming up over the next few weeks as well. Just before we finish, Catherine Gray.
Whee!
Yeah. Karolina Jakowalska.
Woo! Well said.
And I've learned. She taught me how to do it on a podcast. And Beth Weller as well. So there are up and coming guests through July.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Yay!
Oh, we're done, I think.
Right, come on, let's go.
Enjoy your food, everybody. I'm sure it's dinner time in your household.
I wondered what you were saying then.
Simon's off to read a load of books.
You're off to melt somewhere.
Yeah, I've already melted.
Yeah, we're melting.
William's switching over to his games console as we speak.
Only, got to get the boys into bed first. Got to get the boys into bed before I can get my own life back. Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
I think it's been really good this week.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. We'll do another one in a few weeks, another Q&A, because I think it's important we're addressing your questions. But if there's anything you haven't answered, if you continue to post, we'll try between us to get the answered message.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
All right.
We'll see you all next week then.
Thanks, guys.
See
Thank
you all
you.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.